This is
Make It Plain.
Make It Plain. M.I.P.
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson. Make It Plain. Get woke.
Once again, it's time for the founder of the largest online progressive community, DailyKos, the founder of the largest and most accurate polling firm, Civiqs with a Q, and the founder of the most listened to podcast in the world.
Yes, every week, 1 out of 3, Mark. Maybe the most accurate pollster. Maybe. But all definitely right. 1 out of 3. 1 out of 3 really confidently can state that.
But I must say, in terms of Make It Plain, Thursday Coast is still, and it was probably true when we were on radio as well. Thursday Coast is the most downloaded Make It Plain podcast every week.
Ooh, that sounds cool.
And we're daily, so we keep up. You all would also be surprised how many Thursday Coast and other episodes for that matter are down. Like somebody might go on today and download a Thursday Coast from last year. Even though we do it every week and it's current. I mean, we're in real time. It's not our segments aren't timeless, so to speak. But people still go and download old segments because they want to hear your voice, I guess. They want to hear Markos. I guess it's soothing.
Cool.
You're the man, you know. No, welcome
cool here.
Yeah, but welcome, buddy. As always. So let's start this way. Do we owe you and I owe Joe Biden an apology? Have we been were we too hard on him?
No. I don't think we owe him an apology. It's not like he said, "I'm gonna be a progressive president, trust me," and we said, "No, you're not. We don't trust you." Right? He literally said, "I'm gonna get Republicans to vote for my stuff, and I'm gonna go back to the Obama years, which were better than the Trump years, right? But the inequities in the system, whether it's the justice system, the economic system, they were there during the Obama years. So the transformative change that a lot of us were really fighting for, that was being communicated by Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and a couple of other people, right? Joe Biden was very studiously and purposefully positioned himself to the right of those two, to the right of anybody asking for systemic change. And so, I mean, we can't owe him he didn't even wink at us. He didn't even, there was no dog whistles. He was flat out, nah, I'm not following Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal plan. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. I got my own thing. So I don't think it's a question of of owing him an apology. I think it's a question of really giving him credit for adapting to the situation, right? Because there was a difference between the Biden that ran in the primary, because there was no coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah.
There was no economic collapse. Because just to put it all in context, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina were the end of January into mid-February. California was the first state to start shutting down here in the Bay Area. That wasn't until March 15th. So we were already well into the primary race when the pandemic hit. And of course, the shutdown at the time, we were talking about 15 cases, right? That's the famous Donald Trump. We only have 15 cases today. It'll be 0 in a week. And so he evolved his message when the pandemic really hit hard, right? So by summer, we saw that we had the first wave, we had the mass layoffs, we had the economic shutdowns. And instead of sticking with what had worked for him in the primary, he actually realized there's this not even opportunity, there's a necessity to respond to this new reality that we face. And he adopted his message towards systemic change, which this may be the first time that I remember where a candidate tacked to the left after the election, after the primary, or from either party.
Mhm.
You had a Trump who didn't tack anywhere, right? He was just a mess over there, wherever Trump was. There was no going to the center in the general election, right? But usually the standard for any campaign is you appeal to your partisans in the primary. So you're either, extra liberal or extra conservative. And then when the general election comes along, you want to moderate your message to try to scoop up as many people and to create a winning coalition. That's normal. Biden did it opposite. He was a centrist in the primary and then tacked left in the general election. And then, just as importantly, he's governed that way. He's delivering on the stuff that he promised, but he wasn't promising that in the primary. He was promising that in the general election. So I don't think we need to owe him an apology. I think we need to go dude deserves a lot of credit for adapting to the realities because the world changed in 2020 because of the pandemic.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And as one of your latest headlines says, he has surprised a lot of people, and it's a welcome surprise. But here's some things he said on Wednesday, just yesterday. He said, quote, "I think it's 35 or 30 corporations didn't pay a single solitary penny last year, and they're Fortune 500 companies. They made $400 billion. They paid no taxes. How can that make any sense?" He said, "I can affect the standard of living of people I grew up with." Markos, that to me even makes it difficult for the Trumpers to get angry, because no matter where they're coming from, this guy's talking about them, the blue collar, the Scranton type people, those who are either Republican or who claim to be that thing they call themselves independent. I know how you and I feel the same way about that moniker. It was a compelling statement to say, I can affect the standard of living of the people I grew up with. And I know we have a tendency, many of us, and especially those of us in the Black community, to still have our guard up, and that's rational. We should. But this dude is really doing some things that I just did not expect. And, hopefully he'll see it through. But now, maybe we need to change the name of this segment, maybe make it even more popular, from DailyKos to another segment name, and everybody would download this one. I know this segment would be entitled, as you said before, "Joe Manchin is an asshole." Maybe that's the name of our weekly segment. Because on the other extreme, another dude who grew up like him in a state where a whole lot of people grew up like Joe Biden is literally one person trying to block everything that would help everybody.
Yeah. Joe Biden is both simultaneously a curse and a blessing. That's the contradiction of Joe Manchin, right? Because we wouldn't have a $1.9 trillion COVID rescue plan without Joe Manchin. We wouldn't be talking about any of this legislation that's currently being negotiated, the infrastructure bill and the family bill. None of that would be discussed, be in contemplation if Joe Manchin wasn't in the Senate. Remember, we have a 50-50 Senate, and West Virginia is a state that Donald Trump won by 40 points. So we have no business having a senator in West Virginia. And boy, God, sometimes he's just awful. But on the other hand, he is he's allowing some things to go through, right? So for the infrastructure plan, Biden's proposal had a corporate tax rate of 29%, and Manchin's like 25%. You know what? Make it 25. Who gives a crap? Nobody cares if it's 29 or 25%, because they don't care what the deficit is, right? That's what it's all going to come down to in the end. That just means that there's going to be a larger deficit because there's less government or corporate tax revenues to pay for it. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. There's not a single voter that's going to be like, I love what I got. I love my new bridge, and I love senior care for my parents, and I love all this good stuff. but the corporate tax rate's at 29, 25%, and I really wanted it at 29, or I really wanted it to stay the same down at whatever Trump left it at. I forgot, 20% or something. So I don't, in the end, if he allows this infrastructure bill to go through, but the corporate tax rate is 25%, who cares? We got it through. And what's amazing to me is that Biden has the pieces in place to be a transformational FDR type president, even though he has these narrow majorities in both the House and the Senate, and particularly the Senate, given that it's not even a Democratic majority in any real sense, right? Because Joe Manchin is being a pain in the butt. But here's the thing. All this legislation, the $1.9 trillion rescue plan, the infrastructure bill, the family bill, because both of those are $4 trillion. $4 trillion for the next two pieces of legislation. None of it would have had a chance if we had President Warren or President Harris or pretty much almost anybody else that's not the old white straight guy, right? Because Manchin would have loved, he would have loved to have opposed the Warren or the Harris agenda, even if it looked exactly like what we're seeing out of Biden. But Biden's the old good old boy, calls him up, there's Uncle Joe. They connect, and Manchin talks, 25%. They're like, okay, whatever, 25%, and it happens. None of that would be happening with almost anybody else who's president, right? And that's both, I think it's an indictment of Manchin. This is not a good thing. We saw how he got all prickly when Harris went and talked to some editorial board newspapers in his state because, you can't have the black woman coming into his turf and lobbying him. He was furious. So it sucks that we needed the old white guy to win the election. It sucks that we needed the old white guy to actually have a true progressive agenda. But you know what? Both things happened. And whatever it says about the state of race and gender politics in this country, at least good things are happening. So I'm trying, there's a good and there's a bad, and I don't think we ignored that bad component, just like we don't ignore Joe Manchin being an a-hole about DC statehood. He was an a-hole about voting rights. I don't know why he thinks he needs to be the person to stop that. So I don't get those things. On the other hand, things are happening that wouldn't happen without him. So what needs to happen is we need to hold Congress. We need to win a bigger Senate majority to make Joe Manchin irrelevant. Allow him to vote against everything and nobody cares. If we could pick up 4 or 5 seats, which is possible, not probable, possible, then we have a cushion. We get rid of the filibuster, and then we have an even more ambitious second term, not on the spending stuff, because I think the spending stuff is happening, but on things like justice reform and election reform and DC statehood and those pieces that Manchin has inexplicably decided to obstruct.
I hear you. That's a good point. More MIP after this message. Note, the minister, me, said Joe Manchin's an asshole, and the non-clergy person, Markos, said he's a pain in the butt. So,
I thought I can use those words. I was in the army. I learned to speak like a sailor. So this is me trying, and I had to stop myself. My brain says he's an asshole, and it's like, no, don't say that.
The person who actually coined the term asshat for Mitt Romney, man. Markos coined that it went viral. That was Mitt Romney's middle name was asshat. All during 2012. So
and now Mitt Romney defines like one of 3 reasonable Republicans left.
Facebook and Donald Trump. Interesting. It's like they still kind of split the baby. Yeah, he needs to remain banned, but you have to justify why you banned him. I think that was kind of interesting, but at least he remains banned for the time being. I don't know if that'll be permanent.
I mean, yeah, there's some kicking the can down the road sort of situation going on. I hope it really just means write out a freaking case for it, right? It's easy. We know why he was banned. It was a good decision, and just justify it. You can even point to his social media outlet, which is just a stupid blog. And just see that he's continuing the same stuff, right? The same agitating falsehoods, lies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So the case can be made. I'm really hoping that this doesn't mean that this board is going to reinstate him in 6 months and just basically says, have a paper trail. And then that way you can consistently apply it. Because once you do, then there are a lot of other world leaders that really shouldn't be on those platforms. I mean, the Chinese Communist Party and Bolsonaro in Brazil. I mean, you can go down the list, Erdogan in Turkey, people who are trafficking in falsehoods and agitating, even Modi in India, right? You know, his Hindu nationalism and agitating against India's Muslim community. There's a lot of places that if you apply these rules consistently, it's gonna exclude a lot of people that are still on the platform. And so I know, I mean, for sure that Facebook has got to be terrified of that, right? They don't want to be banned in India. They don't want to be banned maybe they're already banned in China, but they don't want to be banned in India and places like that. So it puts them in a difficult place. But I actually think consistency matters. And if there are political leaders that are advocating for violence, I think there should be consequences.
Yeah. Good. Liz Cheney. And what do you think about that whole deal? And is that just something for us to be spectators about, or does what they're doing toward her? Not that I have a lot of love for Liz Cheney. I mean, she is the daughter of the self-admitted, self-styled Darth Vader, incarnate. But can we use that? Does that help us in terms of what we need to do, or mobilize, or inform, or flip in any way?
I mean, this is her internal civil war, and it just means that the Trump wing is going to win fairly easily at this point. I still don't understand how a first-term loser has retained control of his party. I mean, only 3 presidents have lost re-election in the last 100 years. So this is not this is an extra level of loserdom, and none of those other presidents lost the popular vote both times, right? So he is like literally our nation's biggest loser ever. And the fact that the Republicans have latched on to that and that have made denying Biden's legitimate victory a price of admission into the Republican Party just boggles the mind. I mean, it doesn't make sense from a practical standpoint, from a mathematical electoral standpoint. Just, it does not make sense. But that's what they've done. And so I don't think the Cheney decision directly leads to anything that we can do about it, but it just sort of shows that what the Republicans have become is it's a dangerous party, because they will have power because of, the Dakotas having 4 Senate seats, and the same as California and New York with 1 million times the population. But it does hopefully give us some opportunities. Like the best one so far, just as such a good example, is Georgia. Raphael Warnock, new Democrat, won a special election, which means he stands for regular election in next year. So there's Georgia still has a lot of really high profile Republicans that could challenge Warnock, but Donald Trump has decided that he needs a black person to run against a black person. And he's not looking like who in Georgia would be a black Republican that could then run against Warnock. No. He's like, Herschel Walker. I know him because he played football. He said nice things about me over there on Fox News. I want him to run. The twist is that Herschel Walker lives in Texas. He has no ties to Georgia. So they are literally going to import a former football player, that's his entire resume, to Georgia to run against Raphael Warnock. We could not hope for a better scenario. And even funnier is that Republicans in Georgia are paralyzed because they don't want to go against Trump, right? So they're like, okay, if Herschel Walker runs, then we can't run in a primary against them. And it would be the biggest gift in the world for us to have Warnock run against Herschel Walker. And that's not the only case, right? You're going to see this happen in a lot of these states. And the Senate battleground next year is being run in the exact same states that we decided the 2020 presidential election. Arizona, Georgia, Florida, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina. Those are all seats with Senate races, and they're all going to be 1, 2, 3 point differences. And if we can get a bunch of crackpots running against our people in some of these states, we have a better chance of winning. Now, the flip side is that there's a better chance that we get more crackpots in the Senate. And the last thing this nation needs is more Trumpy crackpots in positions of power. But there's nothing we can do about it. That Republicans are going to make their own decisions. They're going to pick their own candidates. And they've decided to follow Trump. And that's going to have its consequences. But I think it does give the opportunities, like giving Warnock an easier re-election campaign that might otherwise be the case.
Please let it be Herschel Walker.
Please. It's just so monumentally stupid. And it really speaks to Trump's thinking, right? Oh, well, a black guy won, so we need another black guy. But we need a black guy who said nice things about me.
And Herschel, the last time we saw Herschel, we had a hearing, one of the hearings on HR 40 on reparations. And Herschel obviously is against it. But then the argument he made, Markos, in making his argument, the argument he used was really one confirming why we need it. And he almost talked himself out of it. So I'm going to do this for the benefit of the audience, and I'm sure you haven't heard this either. This is Herschel Walker testifying, going on the record with his opposition against reparations, everyone. Just take a listen to this. And this is who Donald Trump wants to run. So we hope he does, because he might convince all of us to vote for Raphael Warnock and everybody to vote for Raphael Warnock the way he convinced himself in being against reparations, and reparations are really necessary. Take a listen.
Reparation or atonement is outside the teaching of Jesus Christ, who you are teaching, who will not be teaching the word of God. And I remember my mom mentioning, how could we pay for your great-great-grandfather being burned to death? Or how could you pay for your great-great-uncle being hung? And I understand that those pictures are horrible, but right now, I think the facts founding is going to be very difficult to go back over history when history is not even taught in school on what we're trying to facts find. And that's what I think is so difficult, because as I was looking up reparation, which I've been doing for the last year, it is very, very difficult to find facts on different things of the African-American history. And I think that's what's going to be very difficult in what we're doing right now.
You know, I'm from the deep South. I know about racism. And a matter of fact, you know, we talked about the health. You know, everyone think I'm healthy, but I was diagnosed at one time as mentally unhealthy. It because of being bullied as a little kid, because of my weight, because of my speech. But the things that happened to me was dealing with race. And I overcame through education, which is one of the major things that I talk to the young people today, is education is more important than anything in life. Because when you educate yourself, you're able to see the truth for yourself. And I'm not saying that I think HR 40 is absolutely incredible, but I think to just say it's a facts founding is very difficult. And facts founding of reparation, I think this is a little bit I'm confused at the two right now.
More MIP after this message. He's confused. Now, you just heard Herschel Walker say that he had 2 relatives who were lynched, and that he himself was a victim of racism growing up in the South. So he made the argument for reparations without realizing it. And so, yeah, let him run so he can say, you know, I'm against Raphael Warnock, but there's racism in the South. Anyway, yeah, say it, do it, run, please. And my ancestors lynched like everybody else's.
Yeah. First of all, I'm impressed that you had those clips ready to go, Mark, because I don't think we didn't plan to talk about Herschel Walker. So you had him right there, ready to go. That was very, very pro move. But second of all, I actually thought he made a great case for better teaching the history of the Black experience in America, which is literally what Republicans are freaking out about now, right? Critical race theory, and they're hyperventilating about this. And you're seeing this. Nikki Haley just did the same thing, right? Like talked about there's no racism, we don't need to teach it. But then you read her book, and it has all these passages about how she was discriminated against when she was growing up, right? So it's almost like their argument is if we teach racism, people will think America's a racist country, which you're almost there. You almost got it. You're so close. Yes, teach it. So, but the other piece is part of the reparation bill. I mean, and there's no reparation bill. So, I mean, I don't think we can really point to it, but I think a big chunk of that would be bolstering educational opportunities for marginalized communities, correct? HBCUs and schools in majority Black districts that are chronically underfunded compared to their white peer schools out in the suburbs and other wealthier areas. I mean, that's the kind of work I assume would be part of any sort of comprehensive reparations bill. And so he was almost making the argument. Yeah. His argument wasn't don't do this. His argument, and he didn't realize this, his argument was like, let's teach this better. Let's put some money into this experience. So that was it was confused because I think he really he's almost there. He just has to ideologically he's blocked because he's a Republican and Trump likes him, and so therefore
and he's in Trump, right. And he said, I mean, the man admitted, I can't name 2 relatives of mine who were lynched. He can. I mean, that's what the reparations argument is for. That's who it's for, really. People like his family, because he asked her, what are we going to do about my 2 uncles that were lynched? Get past HR 4. That's what we're going to do. But that's what. But
HR 40 is just discussing how, right? It would even function. There's no actual.
It would establish a commission.
No, you can argue over what
the proposals are. What forms. So, like you're saying, the commission would debate and come to the conclusion. We need better education. We need, systematic.
XYZ.
All of that.
Whatever. And then you can argue about the individual pieces, presumably, because you can say, that's not really that. And you try to come to some consensus.
Right. And what do we do about it and how it continues to manifest itself today in police lynchings and voter suppression. Yeah. And they may come to the conclusion as well, when they are individual family members who can show a direct ancestral line or can show evidence of lynching, then you deal with that too. But so he made the argument. So that's what I'm saying. Let him run because maybe he'll help. But speaking of men like Herschel Walker, there's also Uncle Tim, and a lot of people talking about him and his response to Biden. He was supposed to be the one to shepherd the George Floyd justice and policing legislation in the Senate. And he's been touting himself as one who can get Mitch McConnell to stop blocking it. Joe Biden said from the well of the House, he wants that bill passed on the anniversary of George Floyd's death. But when Tim Scott had the opportunity to speak to the nation about it, he said very little. And it looks like he's going along with McConnell. The Republicans want to do away, or they don't want to do away, I should do away with qualified immunity, which is really the sticking point, Markos, because if you allow qualified immunity to exist, there's no discouragement for officers. If you get rid of qualified immunity, then officers will probably be more likely to remember what side their taser is on versus their gun, because then they will be
take a second and double check. It's
financially liable, and so but Tim Scott is another one. And they're using these people. And you mentioned Nikki Haley. So what's she up? What's she gonna do? Is she trying to run for president? What is she gonna do?
Yeah, she is.
Oh God. So she would run against Trump in the primary?
Yeah, after January 6th, she was outraged at Trump and for inciting violence, and then realized that was on the wrong side of the presidential ambitions and totally walked it back. So Tim Scott thinks he's running for president.
Okay.
So
maybe he has to be her running mate.
So there's a you can who knows what he truly believes, right? I don't believe that the vast majority of elected Republicans think that Donald Trump won the election. I refuse to believe that there's that collective idiocy in the party. They know. Donald Trump knows. He knows he didn't win. Yet they're all going along with this big lie that Trump actually won the election for some reason. And we talked about Lynn Cheney. She's one of the few people. It's like her big sin in the Republican Party is that she has said repeatedly that Joe Biden won the election. Objectively true.
Right.
Everybody, Attorney General Bob Barr couldn't come up with the biggest toady, the biggest Trump toady in the administration,
Right.
couldn't come up with a single instance of voter fraud.
Mm-hmm.
The Supreme Court, right? All packed by 6-3, packed by Trump. Didn't even pretend to look at any of the evidence because there was none. There was nothing to look at. So all these people, the price of admission now in the Republican Party is to pretend that Trump won when none of them believe it. It is a collective delusion. It is collective for people who claim to be Christian and also adherent to values and the Bible to so blatantly lie, knowingly lie about our core democracy just shows how morally bankrupt and corrupt they are as a party. And let's not pretend that there's any hint of ideology. Remember, Donald Trump didn't even bother having a party platform. The Republicans didn't even have a platform in the 2020 Republican convention because the Republican platform is whatever Donald Trump thinks at the moment.
Right.
And in a way that's actually helped us because it's made it harder for them to oppose the Biden agenda, right? You can't really go hard after infrastructure spending when Donald Trump himself had proposed the exact same kind of investment in fixing up our infrastructures. Now, Trump didn't care about it because he was too busy fighting his battles, right? So there's infrastructure week was always derailed by some manufactured BS, but he proposed it. And Republicans didn't argue against it then. So now they look like big hypocrites arguing against it now. And so they can't muster that energy to oppose him. Number two is they are clearly so motivated right now by race that, again, they don't know how to target Joe Biden. There was a poll, Mark. I don't know if you saw it. It was about a week ago. I was blown away. There's a poll that it was like 65% of Americans thought that Joe Biden was more moderate than Barack Obama. It was like 2-1. Joe Biden is more moderate than Barack Obama. By no objective measure was Obama more leftist than Joe Biden. Joe Biden has run a genuinely progressive administration through and through.
Hell, Joe Biden's almost more progressive than Barack Obama. I know I'm not supposed to say that.
No. I mean, yeah, me personally, but definitely the way they governed, not even close.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? What's the difference? The difference is that Joe Biden is white, so he's immediately automatically assumed to be moderate. And so this lack of ideology, this lack of cohesiveness, conservative media is just following Trump's whatever is Trump's motivation. And, if Trump wants to freak out about cancel culture, then conservative media is going to talk about Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss. And I guess there was something about Snow White a couple of days ago that I couldn't even bring myself to click because it seems so freaking stupid. But good. Let them focus on that crap instead of focusing on opposing this legislation. And you have a situation which is kind of shocking given how aggressive the Biden administration has been, that there's no organized opposition to him. Yeah. Remember, with Obama, you had the Tea Party. With Trump, you had the Resistance and the Women's March and all these, the resistance groups. There's really nothing happening on the right now. It's quiet. It's crickets over there.
They don't have no plan, no agenda, no nothing. It's nothing.
Nothing.
It's absolutely nothing. Did I hear you say Tim Scott expects Nikki Haley to run?
No, they both want to run.
So wait a minute. Tim wants to run for president too?
Yeah. He thinks he's running.
Okay. Well,
You're gonna have another.
I hope he runs too. Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, it would be ideal if Biden didn't run a second, because I think Kamala would have an easier time beating Tim Scott. Black on black. Looks like we had white on white.
Yeah, there's no way Tim Scott ever gets through it. No person of color or woman ever gets through a Republican primary.
Yeah, I don't even see Nikki Haley getting through that primary. How could she?
Kidding me? We barely. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Our white guy barely got elected. Do you think these Republicans are going to? No, hell no.
Markos, Moulitsas, DailyKos, Civiqs with a Q, The Brief, every week. Check it out. And as always, Markos, we appreciate you, buddy.
Thank you so much. Get vaccinated, please. I'm sure everybody watching or listening to this has already been vaccinated. But try to get people in your social circle to vaccinate. We need that herd immunity so we can all go back to normal. Mark, remember all those people that before the vaccine said that we just needed to let the disease run rampant so we would all have herd immunity?
Yeah. And
now that we actually have a tool to get the herd immunity, now they don't care about herd immunity anymore.
Yeah.
Freaking psychopaths.
Yeah. Excuse me, Jared Kushner. I'm sorry. He had something in my throat. I'm sorry.
They liked herd immunity when it was killing people. Now that you can do it without killing people, suddenly they're less interested.
Sick. You're right.
Yeah.
Get vaccinated, folks. Markos, Moulitsas, DailyKos. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Talk to you next week.
You too. Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.